some pretty cool remembrances of a pretty cool lady. And that was fun. We've seen this before, right? After leading the Indianapolis 500 for 199 laps, in the final lap down the home stretch, car runs out of gas. Or after leading the Masters for 3 days and 71 holes, the talented young golfer lets his adrenaline get the best of him, and he duck hooks his drive out of bounds on the final hole. Or it's 2 outs, bottom of the 9th. The pitcher has a no-hitter going, and he's facing the number 9 batter, who has a batting average less than 200, and the pitcher lazily hangs a curveball over the plate and gives up a bloop single. Okay, for some of you non-sports fans, the hare tears out in front of the turtle in a head-to-head competition, confident to easily defeat his slow-footed competitor, so he slows down, takes it easy, even takes a nap, only to have the turtle pass him at the finish line. What's the point? Well, it's about finishing well. Whether you're a college senior in your final year of school, whatever that's going to look like this year, or a woodworker finishing up a huge project, or an employee nearing retirement, or an author putting the final touches on a book, or a couple celebrating their 50th anniversary, we want to finish what we've started, and we want it to be good. How you finish says something about what you stand for. There's an old preacher's story of a construction worker who for 40 years built homes for a contractor, and he's nearing his retirement. He's tired of his work, but he's got one last house to build. But his heart's not in it. He uses low-grade lumber. He doesn't worry much about leveling and measuring. He scrimps on the hardware, and the house is poorly built. And when it's done, the builder was surprised when the contractor thanked him for 40 years of service and handed him the keys to the house that he just built. So, there's a life lesson in all of that for us. Maybe it's moral encouragement, or simply a work ethic axiom. We need to finish well what we've started. But I'd like to shift the focus toward the spiritual. Jesus, on one occasion, had some guy who wanted to follow him. The story's recorded in the 9th chapter of St. Luke. Now, following Jesus would have been thought of as a pretty cool thing to do. I mean, he's healed scores of people. He's preached amazing sermons. He even told a storm to stop, and it did. I mean, who does this sort of stuff? Of course you want to follow Jesus. There's never been anyone like him. But Jesus throws up a roadblock. He says, "No one who puts a hand to the plow and looks back is fit for the kingdom of God." Whoa, those are some pretty strong words. I know nothing of plowing, but I assume that if someone who plows keeps looking back, then the plow won't deliver nice straight cuts in the ground, and the end result is a haphazard tilling of the soil. Why would a person look back? I used to think that maybe Jesus was saying that a looking back person is wanting to go back where they came from. But that doesn't make any sense. Someone who's plowing isn't thinking, I wish I could go back and re-plow that really nice sandy soil. Now that was fun plowing. I don't think a plower would say that. I think someone who is plowing and who is tempted to look back is someone who wants to look at all the great plowing they have done before they're done. It's like a marathoner who runs 26.1 miles and decides to run the last 1/10 of a mile backwards in order to celebrate his or her accomplishments. Try running 1/10 of a mile backwards. See where you end up, if not on your rear end. And I think Jesus is telling this would-be follower, okay, but no looking back. No stopping until you get to the end, because you've got to finish well. So this life we live and this faith in God we hold while we live life is a long run. Now, this has been said in one way or another over these past 3 weeks, but it bears repeating. There's nothing easy about life in general and faith in particular. There are trials and temptations and challenges and setbacks and failures along the way. But hopefully one, faith, will make the other, life, more possible and even more enjoyable. Now we are in our 18th or 19th week of social distancing, of sheltering in place, of fearing a virus, of wrestling with economic uncertainties, of wondering, when is this all going to go away? I'm sure, like me, you thought when all of this started back in the middle of March that by the middle of the summer, things would be better. But here we are, and they aren't. Businesses that reopened are now closing again. Looks like schools are only going to be online. Hospitals are overwhelmed, and more people are getting sick and dying. Believe it or not, there are phone apps that you can get a hold of that give you running totals. I've got one of those. As of late this week, the time that I was preparing this message, there has been 15.5 million people around the world who have been infected with COVID-19 and 633,000 who have died. In the United States, over 4 million have gotten sick and almost 150,000 have died. And in our state, California, over 400,000 have been infected and over 8,000 have died. And medical experts suggest that we haven't yet come to what's called the second wave. And it's tempting to look back over these 18 and 19 weeks and say, you know what? I've done a pretty good job of socially distancing and keeping safe. I think I can lighten up now and kind of do what I want to do from this point on. That would be to have a hand on the plow, looking back and making a mess of everything to come. My sense, and it's based on my faith conviction of how best to love my neighbors, is that we need to finish this COVID-19 marathon well. Now, I have no idea where we are in this marathon. Maybe we are at the 26.1 mile marker, or maybe we're just halfway. But we have to finish well. And while there are a lot of challenges to what finishing well might mean, for me, as a pastor, one of the hardest is not to be able to adequately celebrate the lives of those who have finished their course here on earth and now rest in God's eternal embrace. We've lost some wonderful members like Tanya, and we haven't really been able to say goodbye to them. I don't want to give you the wrong impression and say that I love officiating at funerals. That makes me sound like I enjoy when our members die. I don't. But there is something so powerful about hearing life stories, of hearing of life accomplishments, of hearing about the power of relationships. But the best part for me is to hear how people have finished well because of their faith. There is something so powerful for me to celebrate a life that drew strength from a relationship with God, especially at the end of life. I think when Paul wrote this letter to his protege, Timothy, he was nearing the end. It appears from things he says elsewhere in the letter that he's in Rome and he's in prison, and he knows that things are not going to end well. But he draws upon years of faith and living in a relationship with Jesus to say, I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. I have kept the faith. And he awaits what athletes of his day would receive when finishing a competition, a laurel wreath, But for Paul, it's even better than that, receiving a crown of righteousness. COVID-19 aside, if there's one message that I'm hoping that hits home this morning or whenever you're watching this, it's the encouragement to go the distance with God, to stay the course, so to speak, until your final breath. It seems that going the distance pays off the greatest in those final breaths. That is one of the gifts of pastoral ministry, to be able to be with folks in their final days and to see how a life of faith plowed the way for an acceptance, and even in some case a joy-filled acceptance of what's coming toward the end of life. Now, I'm not saying that every person of faith is excited about leaving behind loved ones. That's never easy. But there is often a quiet confidence in knowing that the one who raised Jesus from the grave will be the one who opens up eternity where true life really begins. Early in my ministry at Christ Lutheran Church, I visited in the hospital one of our great saints. His name was Art. Art was a quiet man, but a steadfast, faithful man. He never said much to me. I remember him a couple of times on his way out from worship asking where I got the sermon that I preached that day. I guess he thought that we preachers got our sermons from a book or something. And I never knew if he asked this thinking that the sermon was so good it couldn't possibly have come from me, or if it was so bad, maybe I ought to discontinue copying from the source. At any rate, Art was dying. His breathing was labored. He hadn't spoken in days. He was out of it. And as I stood at the foot of his bed with his family present, all of a sudden, Art opened his eyes and he sat up and he said, "Wow." And then he closed his eyes and he laid back down. And in the matter of some minutes later, he died. Wouldn't you love to have seen what Art saw? Oh, you will. But that's the stuff, I think, that is given as a gift to those who go the distance, who finish the race, who win the prize. But maybe even better is the gift given to any family member who ever has had to stand at the bedside of a dying, faithful loved one to witness the acceptance and the peace in those final moments of somebody who finished well. In no small way, when Jesus told the guy who wanted to follow him that he couldn't go forward with Jesus while looking back, I think Jesus is really talking about himself. The temptations to look back, to even stop plowing altogether, were with Jesus to the end. In the garden when he prayed, and on the cross when others mocked him, he could have said, that's it. I'm done. No more. But he didn't. For your sake and mine, Jesus went the distance. He finished well. And then, do you know what he did? He promised that we would get whatever he won. It's sort of like an Olympic marathon winner receiving the gold medal and then handing it to an overweight non-athlete in the stands. We get the reward, the crown of righteousness that rightfully belongs to Jesus. Until that time, we press on, one foot in front of the next, one step at a time. We wake up in the morning with the plow on our hands and we look forward to the path that we will till that day. Oh, at times, we're going to get discouraged, and there will be times that we will want to quit. But we hear the heavenly call of our God, who invites us to keep our eyes on the prize and our hopes in the one, the only one who will see us through. May the life that you are building reflect the values of the Master Builder, who desires our lives to reflect his goodness. And may you be energized to run the long run. And may the day, when it all draws to a close, find you saying, as you gaze into eternity, wow. Amen. And I'm not sure I finished so well there.
Well, you get another shot at it next week.